Sawadika. Hi, Batazzans and friends and family that are watching from everywhere. Welcome back to the Bitazza Invite series and Ask Me Anything with me, Didi Wimon-Pan-Vibunma, the Chief Communications Officer of Bitazza. So today I have again a very special guest from one of the projects listed on the Bitazza platform. But before anything else, let me invite my co-host of today, Art Gavin Pongpandesha, the CEO and co-founder of Bitazza.
Hi Didi, hi everyone. Glad to be back.
Good to see you again. It's been quite some time since we've done this. So let us actually say hello to our Thai audience for a bit. สวัสดีค่ะ สวัสดีค่ะคุณอาร์ต
ครับสวัสดีครับคุณดีดีแล้วก็สวัสดีครับท่านผู้ชมวันนี้ก็กลับมาอีกครั้งหนึ่งนะครับหลังจากที่ห่างหายไปนานนะครับก็คิดถึงทุกๆคนครับ
ค่ะก็วันนี้นะคะทาง Bitazza รายการ Bitazza Invites นะคะก็มีแขกรับเชิญสุดพิเศษจากโปรเจกต์ Fuse นั่นเองนะคะโดยที่ดิฉันดีดีวิมลพันธ์วิบูลย์มานะคะแล้วก็คุณอาร์ตกวินพงษ์พันเดชา CEO แล้วก็ Co-founder ของ Bitazza เนี่ยจะมาทำการสรุปทุกอย่างให้ฟังเป็นภาษาไทยอีกทีนึงนะคะก็วันนี้เรามีแขกรับเชิญเป็นชาวต่างชาติซึ่งก็คือคุณ Mark Smargon จากทาง Fuse นะคะก็ไม่ต้องห่วงพรุ่งนี้ติดตามชมภาษาไทยได้เลยนะคะแล้วก็ห้ามพลาดเด็ดขาดเพราะว่าจริงๆมีแคมเปญที่จะมีการ airdrop Fuse Token ด้วยก็อย่าลืมบอกกล่าวเพื่อนๆแล้วก็ติดตามรอชมของพรุ่งนี้กันได้เลยนะคะตอนนี้ก็ขออนุญาตกลับไปเป็นภาษาอังกฤษก่อนค่ะ Alright, so without further ado, here is our special guest of tonight, Mr. Mark Smargon from Fuse.io, who is the CEO and a co-founder. Hello, Mark.
Hello. How are you? Really great to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
It's really good to see you, and I think the timing could not have been more perfect because prior to 2022 ending, we had a chance to actually have two very exciting things happening here at Bitazza together with Fuse, with the Fuse listing for Thai baht pair trading on November 25th, right here in the Bitazza platform, and the very next day, we had also seen your presence at the Blockchain Thailand Genesis, which is the leading event here in Thailand in terms of the blockchain technology, and also Web3 was discussed here. So that was very exciting. We also saw each other at Token 2049 in Singapore earlier last year. So as you could see, I think that you guys have been very active in the Asian market. But before we go there, perhaps in your own words, would you like to introduce the project to our audience?
Yes. So Fuse is so first of all, we really like Bitazza. We go way back more than almost I think 3 years ago. So I'll tell the story later of what we did together and how this came into being. It was a process. It didn't happen overnight. But I'll give a little bit of a background before we start. So 3.5 years ago, I founded Fuse, which is an Israeli company. We're based in Tel Aviv. And the company was actually not my first. I'm pretty veteran in crypto. I've been full-time doing blockchain and crypto since before it was called blockchain. It was in 2013. And really Fuse is building an alternative to Visa. That's how we see this technology being used in the future. So right now, if you really look into tokens and currencies and technologies, there's a lot of confusion. So when people say Bitcoin, they mean Bitcoin the network, Bitcoin the technology, and Bitcoin the currency. What people don't know, especially if you have a perspective of working 10 years in the space, is that the price may be volatile, but developers that are building products and entrepreneurs that are looking for solutions, and business services are always evolving, and the amount of developers adopting this technology is only growing. So we try to understand how we can envision mainstream usage, not specifically investment or speculative use cases. How will people interact with this technology? And that requires some level of understanding in terms of the technology. So we are really one of the first teams that working on Ethereum since before it was actually released. I know Vitalik Buterin, met him when he was 19 years old. He was not famous back then, and I couldn't understand a lot of what he said. But today we understand that it's really foundational technology that one day will replace physical cash. And Fuse is really building a network that is tailor-made only for use cases that require paying B2B payments or P2P payments, doing things that you would use Visa or MasterCard, but globally and with radically different business models. So basically, to make a short explanation, Fuse is building a network that is like Visa, works everywhere in the world for every merchant, and is 99% cheaper. That's the quick explanation.
Nice. So Mark, I feel like you've been in the space for so long, way longer than even I. I entered the space 2016, 17 back then. You've been through multiple cycles. You've seen rises and falls of like many different projects and narratives, and the technology evolved all the way from Bitcoin to where we are today. Just want to pick your brains on having been in the space for so long. What do you foresee as being like the most? What do you think is the most important thing for blockchain to be incorporated into daily lives? We talk a lot about mass adoption, and understand you spend a lot of time working towards mass adoption. So I mean, to you, what is mass adoption, and you're having seen so much of the evolution of the space, like how do you see us getting there?
Yeah, so I feel like there's a lot of trends that are converging, and sometimes speculative bubbles are formed, but there's a lot of trends that are not speculative. Like, I don't believe that there's a way to go back from open source code. If you build something like Linux, it's not going to, you won't be using anything that is not open source that is better than Linux ever. So it's really democratization of an essential piece of the technology, and it took decades to form. And we're talking about Linux. Linux is what's enabled scaling for the computing. Cloud computing is powered mostly by Linux. Things like mobile phones and mobile operating systems are all based on Linux. And this is very, very specific to operating systems. If we're looking on money, there's a much bigger problem. The fact that you have 200 years of fiat money and several thousand years of very abstract understanding of value. And now it's radically changing. And, it's usually that those very big, very complicated systems like fiat money are usually being, being governed by disasters. Or, it's like all the rules about fiat money were written after there was an explosion or some kind of, in the 20s, there was a big depression. So we changed all the rules again. Now there's in 2008 crisis, they changed all the rules again. So what I understand from the technology, that it's not speculative, that it's boring. There's a lot of trade-offs. Usually people don't like to talk about it. They like to hype things. But what's happening with crypto, the same thing that happened with pretty much any technology in the past. First, everybody are talking about it and nobody's doing it. And then everybody are doing it and nobody's talking about it. And this is where things begin to be really, really boring, because it's not sexy like Bitcoin. It's starting to be, it's like a Bitcoin fork. And then it became Ethereum, and then an Ethereum fork, and then another fork, and then another fork. And then you really don't know where one technology starts and another technology ends. And you realize historically that really the last person that built a blockchain from scratch, really from scratch, and that is Satoshi Nakamoto, and that's also debatable. So all I'm saying is that this is how I see the future, that this technology will seep into traditional finance, just like Microsoft embraced Linux. If you can't beat them, join them.
That's great. I feel like, and also you mentioned that even prior to Fuse, you were doing like multiple startups before you got here. I remember we had a chat, you even saw the evolution of the internet itself, with the e-commerce scene and everything coming into the picture. And now you're here building out the payment network. So why do you think it's important that, Fuse is utilizing this technology to facilitate, especially payments, where you put a lot of work in, and or if there's anything else you want to add to that, feel free.
Yeah, so I think that's really why Fuse is doing what it's doing. For the last 20 something years, I've been working a lot with businesses, and it started in early 2000s. Actually, my first company, I started it when it was the year 2000. And it's been 23 years. It's been a long time, and I see a lot of equivalence. I draw a lot of parallels with this Web3 movement and crypto in general, because back in the day there was no e-commerce. So it was at the beginning, let's build a website, and then it turned into, okay, how do I call the website that is generating revenue? You build a website, it's usually a one-time thing. It's not that good business. You go build it and that's it. There's no recurring revenue. So very early in the day, when somebody wanted to build a store or something like that, you wouldn't say, I need a store. You would actually need to build everything from scratch. This is how I feel banking today, like digital banking. This is how it works. So if you want to build, most companies in the year 2000 were like Amazon. They would build their own e-commerce, everything from zero. And this is what we built 20 years ago. And we said, okay, in the future, and I think we were pretty right about that, in the future, there won't be a difference between e-commerce and commerce. There wouldn't be a difference between online and offline. Everything would be online. Even if it's in the offline world, everything is e-commerce, even if it's in the traditional world. Unfortunately, today, 20 years later, I would say things are much slower than I thought. I thought Israel, for instance, will have much more, Stripe. We don't have it here yet. And still most of money moves in checks, in like paper checks, B2B. And we're talking about Europe, North America. It's still a lot of adoption especially from consumers, adoption for digital payments, but still most of the bulk of the money, and I would say pretty much third to half the point of sale transactions are still being made, or the value is being transferred in analog or not in a most efficient way. This is really. You asked me about my perspective. This is the main thing that I think about when I look at crypto in the perspective of 10 years. That there's definitely a really good reason why other things happen so fast, and the banking disruption or the crypto revolution is not happening that fast, because really the risk here is much higher than just disrupting a vertical like food delivery. There's a lot of verticals that touch on very sensitive parts of regulation that this technology calls a direct challenge on those regulations. For instance, securities law. For instance, the central banking and the central bank model. It calls into scrutiny the inflation model, the inflationary fiat model that we have today. So it really touches on a lot of things that are really from a bad angle are making the old system look really, really bad. On the other hand, it creates competition because suddenly people want to have their money work more modern and being able to send money at night and being able to send money on weekends. I would say just like the most disruptive technologies, especially today, we see it in hindsight. After 14 years since Bitcoin released, we can really see a parallel between this technology and the early internet and also even the early phone. In terms of what it enables, the good and the bad.
You did touch on regulation being part of the reasons why, maybe things are moving slower than expected. Being such an important part of our lives. Money is something that really is highly regulated by every country, and due to recent events of the unfolding of exchanges going bankrupt, lenders going belly up, and there's so many things that went on last year. Being like I think it's like one of the most challenging years that crypto faced. How do you see whatever we're building in Web3? How do you view the recent events and what's ahead for us, and also in terms of like regulation? I understand your centralized entities actually had a lot of issues, but DeFi, Web3, smart contracts still worked as usual, as designed. So one could also argue that it's also like a test that we've gone through such hard times, and then smart contracts blockchain still worked as designed. So there are cases to be made, right? Like that the technology itself is working, and that centralized parties are actually the ones failing, right?
So I feel like I have more of a personal. I wouldn't say this is. I have a lot of answers and numbers and like very, but from a personal perspective, every time this is not the first time that I see this decline in crypto. But also for some reason, and I want to put my finger on this reason right now. This time I feel more confident than ever. If we're looking in perspective, if we're looking on 2017, that was really good, and then look at 2018, there was no stable coins, nobody used DeFi. There was no Web3 yet. It was only, the buzzword only started to appear, and pretty much every buzzword started to appear back then. But in terms of actual usage, people that are actually doing DeFi transactions and doing NFTs, this wasn't really possible. In terms of DEXs, it didn't exist yet. Uniswap only started in 2018. In terms of the early attempts for ICOs were banned by the SEC. Actually, in terms of securities law, we were in a very bad place in terms of in the ecosystem, because people said, okay, everybody are about to go to jail tomorrow morning. That was the feeling when you see the price falling. The price, of course, fell much harder. And what you could do with Bitcoin in 2019, and it's pretty much sell it and leave. So you had a lot of people that just sold and left. Numbers go down 80%. You don't have anything to do. You capitulate and withdraw your funds and go. So I would say that in terms of ecosystem, in terms of usage, in terms of pretty much every other metric, you need to have this perspective to understand how better we are today. One thing that didn't fall in 2018 and wasn't that speculative, it's amount of developers on Ethereum. There's an amount that is very steady, and it changes only upwards when the price goes up. It doesn't really go down when the price goes down, because building on a cloud or building on an API or building any product is not something speculative. When you decide to do it, it's not because the price is very high, unless you really try to scam people. If you use Ethereum, it's probably because you didn't look at the price and decide that it's good to use Ethereum. You looked at the code and looked at the APIs and the documentation and researched this and made a decision to work and build your project on Ethereum. So it's two very different ideas behind, why should I use this technology? In Bitcoin, it's one reason. In Ethereum, it's completely different. So this is why I think that whoever didn't understand that in 2017 understands it today, and this is why we're not seeing a big decline in the way I see it. I don't see a big decline in usage or adoption in terms of this technology. That was
Right.
the long explanation. But I also said that in previous downturns, personally, from looking at all the projects and in terms of strategy, it was clear that the bear market is much better to push projects, especially in crypto, than a bull market. And I can give you several reasons, but that's a different topic. Bear market is a very good environment for trial and error. In the bull market, it's not easy to do trial and error because there's only trial and everything goes up. In a bear market, you can actually do those cycles of trial and error and not be worried that the hype and the noise are kind of like skewing your results. So that's really the problem in a bull market. You don't really know what model works. In a bear market, you can see who is swimming naked. There's a saying.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? What you mentioned about like developers, activity going up, and it's up only because people who come into the space, they get sucked in and they buy into the narratives of building, and then that keeps going up and up. So it seems like.
But by the way, it doesn't mean that the developer adoption on Ethereum goes up necessarily. It could be also lateral. I can be working on Ethereum, but actually using the Binance chain, or just like we have a lot of developers from Ethereum coming to Fuse, building on Fuse is not necessarily building on Ethereum. In terms of technology, it's not that different.
Right, because you guys are also EVM compatible, which means
Exactly.
that whatever technology is being built on Ethereum or a similar chain would be immediately available to Fuse as well. Right?
Yeah.
In terms of like, you mentioned that some of the Ethereum developers actually moved over to Fuse to build. What's your strategy in terms of like attracting the developer mindshare? Getting them to be excited about the ecosystem. Are you bringing them on through grants or through how do you sell your project to your developers?
So actually, our approach is a bit different. We see the world outside of Ethereum as our focus. So we're not really trying to capture Ethereum's market share. We think there's enough Ethereum killers. It's also very 2017, to build a new blockchain to kill Ethereum. We don't use a blockchain for merely building a blockchain. So for us, a blockchain is a means to an end. Just like when you see the Bitcoin ecosystem, which is amazing, their blockchain is not built as just like this innovative thing that will control the world one day. That's not really why blockchain was there. Blockchain was really a means to an end, just a good model, a way to execute their business model, their tokenomics. And their tokenomics is specific to them. I really look at our blockchain as a way to store money in a non-custodial way. The advantage of being an L1 is the fact that we can work globally. So there's several advantages on different, I would say, levels. So one big advantage and one of our big focuses in terms of strategy is to not have custody at all. So we don't really look to build a bank, get licensed, trying to understand the local regulations. We would never be able to understand local regulations in Asia or in Thailand without physically being there on the ground. And we can't really be everywhere in the world. So we want to work with experts, local companies that are regulated. And right now, e-money regulation, which first appeared in Europe, but really every place in Europe now has an e-money regulation. Every place in Europe has attention to crypto and special focus on money laundering laws in terms of on-ramping in and out of the local domestic fiat money system. So the bottom line is that you have a rapid change that is fueled by consumer demand everywhere in the world. Governments, look to understand this asset better, build digital regulation like e-money. It's all fueled by consumer demand, and our ability today to build a network that is much cheaper than Visa is much higher and much better than it was for Visa in the 60s. So today we can really offer a system that has no chargebacks, for good and for bad. Hence, it doesn't also need to charge SMBs or any business for that matter high costs, because it's not really managing risk. It can really provide a new alternative to the business model of Visa. Something that is more fitting the 21st century, and really the way we look at Fuse is you talked about developer adoption. There's much more developers that in the world that know how to use Stripe and Visa than developers that know how to use blockchain. And I would argue blockchain's real problem is not that it's not comfortable for consumers. Actually, the biggest problem is it's not comfortable for developers, and it wouldn't become comfortable just by teaching them how to build contracts. Most developers, they don't really need to know how to build contracts. It's like if I'm building a store or if I'm building a wallet, I don't need to know how to build the infrastructure that powers this the currencies that the store is using. So what we see is that crypto is not intended for all developers, because it's really very hard to build new forms of money, and it's very experimental. Most developers we want to onboard are developers that are coming from Stripe, coming from Shopify, coming from Wix. This is our target audience, the long tail of developers and the long tail of companies, of entrepreneurs.
You said like having developers coming from all of these places, but I just wanted to also touch on you started Fuse from Israel, and within that region there's probably a lot of developers as well. But how do you see the world of developers being spread out around the world? Like what kind of markets, geographical regions that are seeing a lot of adoption of these technologies at the moment?
I think I'm a real believer that open source financial services are the future. And open source financial services, what it means is building. It's two things. One, open source is a way to coordinate a lot of companies. It's not really a short-term it's really a long-term investment. Building protocols and coordinating everybody to use one big infrastructure, or finding a way for thousands or millions of merchants to accept the same stablecoin. I'm giving those examples, but it's all thanks to this open source movement. It wouldn't be possible without it. Right now in the financial space, open source is rare. It's not really being used. If I'm a bank, I wouldn't be looking to buy open source software. I'm going to IBM or Accenture or the Indian Tata, and I will buy an off-the-shelf product for billions of dollars that will probably come with a special hardware. It's probably air-gapped. It's probably been developed before the internet even existed. And cloud in their world works very different than the cloud in our world. So open source is really a big part of it. So open source financial services is not something that we see very common right now, but I believe this is going to be more and more popular because today Stripe is mostly North America, parts of Europe, parts of Africa. You have Visa that is maybe very global, but still the settlement time requires a lot of intermediaries, spanning a lot of countries, very expensive. SMBs are paying the highest fees there as well. So all the existing solutions, they're all not really global, not really that cheap. And the absurd thing is that where you're going into the developing world, South America, Africa, Asia, you don't have people with visa, you actually pay the highest amounts of money. So really, the small businesses pay the most, the small countries pay the most, the poorest people pay the most. And this is not a super equal system, and definitely not something that Gen Z kids will relate to. You know, I don't see the new generation going to a physical branch and starting sending checks. You know, if you have a smartphone, all I'm saying is that financial services are going to be disrupted because we don't really have a global system, and open source financial services are the future, because this is the first time we can imagine something like that.
Let me jump in here, because I think you made really interesting points, whether that is the challenges with the traditional financial services, and you mentioned democratizing through open source. And as you mentioned, you know, there's so many surrounding factors into why the current businesses and corporations are not actually as open as you would have liked them to be. So in your own words, how would you foresee these businesses bridging over from the old world to the new world? What would be some of the key drivers to actually convince them to change? And I suppose exactly as you said, with the newer, younger generation that's looking for always solution, better, faster, cheaper, where do you see the two worlds meeting, and what would be some of the proposals that you would imagine or envision it to be?
Yeah, so everywhere in the world, pretty much any country, the biggest employer is this sector of small and medium businesses. So usually they're the biggest employer in terms of employees, in terms of spending, because they're really the long tail of the domestic financial system. And for them, it's very low tech. They don't really have a lot of money to compete with big retailers. And usually they use systems that take ages to, like, they're the most low tech and all the systems and the most expensive systems, they're usually the last to upgrade. It takes a lot of time to disrupt a sector that is that big. And that not organized in terms of unions and stuff like that. There's a lot more advantages to being a global, conglomerate and really have vertical integration. But if, for instance, we're looking at a company like Starbucks in the US, they launched one of the first payment apps in the world. Instantly, they had a big chunk of the revenue for the entire network going on mobile. I don't see a local coffee chain that can compete with a company like Starbucks and doing vertical integration and create a loyalty system that is working with stars, and people can come and pay at the point of sale, and everything works really, really seamlessly together and sleek and well designed. High barrier of entry even to build mobile apps. Not to talk even about building integration and doing good experience with the POS system, getting consumers into the physical world, engaging them in the physical world is really something that SMBs don't know how to do digitally. They would go to a printer and they will print maybe a coupon, with the paper, and really most businesses anywhere in the world, this is still the easiest way, the most straightforward way. And if we want to do something mobile or digital, God forbid, it's already a high entry barrier to compete. So I would say that we want to level the playing field. That's really how I see when we're talking about democratization. I, as a small company today, can compete with huge, in the internet world, I can compete with huge conglomerates. My digital presence can be on par with much bigger competitors than me. If I'm technical enough as a business, I can compete. My ability to reach customers is much higher. And this is right now what is problematic with most retailers, most SMBs, and really most startups that want to compete with something like Uber or compete with something like Grab. If I want to build a local sharing economy startup to do rent, to do cab fare, to do scooters, to do food delivery, I no longer need to get an investment for $100 million. That's what I mean when I say leveling the playing field. So there's no one company like Uber managing all the entire universe, cab fare, the whole world of food delivery. It's too big and too complicated for one company to manage, and the reason was the technology was a high entry barrier. So that's what we want to change at Fuse.
So that's actually really, really interesting. And I think that this vision to drive mass adoption, essentially, you would then see this tech that we have been talking about being adopted by several different industries where previously they may not have an access to. Really interesting. So actually, we have talked quite a bit about your vision and about how Fuse came together. Could we just go into a little bit more depth in terms of what the Fuse ecosystem consists of, just to share with our audience?
Yeah, so Fuse really built a strategy. Our strategy was network first. So we launched the network, kind of built it bottom up. The first thing was released is an L1 public blockchain. The whole idea was to take the Ethereum playbook. We're not shy about it. We really like Ethereum. We don't want to replace Ethereum. We think Ethereum right now is the biggest ecosystem by far, bigger than all the rest combined in terms of user adoption, developer adoption, and in terms of actual value. In terms of being the cheapest, or in terms of being the specific, like it's really a place where you do a lot of experimentation, and it's censorship resistant. And it's mostly anonymous. We actually don't care about any of this. So this is why we said that probably not going to be one blockchain to rule the world. We don't believe that Ethereum will have all the value in the world, and it's not going to hold all the knowledge in the world. Right now, there's about 500,000 daily active users. I would say it's like probably more than that. It's not every day you do transactions, but it's 500,000 to 1 million. It's much smaller than Binance Chain. Or even Axie Infinity. If you look at 6 months ago, I don't know today, I didn't look, but there's a lot of blockchains that are bigger in terms of users. We're talking about like very, very rough estimations, about 30 million people that know how to use Web3 in the entire space. I'm not talking only about Ethereum, but in Ethereum technology. Which is also Binance Chain and also to some extent Solana. I look at this entire market, and it's tiny. 30 million people, most of them developers. It's really not that much. It's much bigger than it was. I'm talking about very tech savvy investors. This number is really technical people, but it's not our audience. So we're not really trying to replace Ethereum. What we did that is very different is building a vertical specific ecosystem, and try to bring all the partners around that specific vertical. And we focus on B2B payments, P2P payments, social payments, any type of payment that today in the financial system you really have a difficulty making money from it. If you look at all the payment service providers in the world, they don't make any money. They try to find ways to make money, but it's really a problematic business model. It's not specific to America. It's everywhere in the world. Users don't expect to pay money for P2P payments. It's just not something that you can charge money like you're charging a merchant. So this creates a real problem for companies like Visa, because they don't know how to do transactions that are free. There's always risk management, and there's always chargebacks. So really the model that was created in the 60s is just not ready for today. And we want to create an ecosystem around business tools, business adoption. So we're looking to add companies like Request that are doing invoicing, AgnosisSave that allow you to use multi-sig, and we have Modulus, which is enabling any merchant to launch his own storefront. In the future, we want to be providing every product that Visa or Stripe or Square or Plaid currently offer. So APIs to check account balances, wallets, open source wallets, of course, white label wallets, cloud infrastructure, so people can actually, launch without running nodes and stuff like that. We're talking about voting. Governance is also very important. If you want to build a loyalty system, you can actually give users a way to vote. Anything that has to do with NFTs, for us, NFTs are payments. This idea that I need to invest in Ethereum to buy NFT, or I need to be an investor to buy NFTs, that's very 2020. It's not the reality today. The reality today is that users have a demand for NFT. They can just buy it with dollars. So the entire suite of business tools, we want to really offer a one-stop shop. You asked what is the difference between our ecosystem and Ethereum. The main big difference is that if a business, we're focused on business adoption, and if a business wants to build on Fuse, it can actually own part of the infrastructure, and it can participate in the governance. And I think that's super important, because those businesses are the ones that are consuming the block space on Fuse. And they can also control the governance, have a say, and they can also partner with the rest of the stakeholders in the network, because they're synergetic to that use case, to that vertical. Hope that was a sufficient explanation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So essentially, you addressed the infrastructure and also just being open and I dare say friendly blockchain for people to use. Is there anything else that you would want to reveal? It could be something that is currently being worked on or developed, or any new and exciting things to be announced here?
So actually, one of the most exciting projects that we're currently working on is the project with Bitazza, Freedom Wallet. I'm not kidding. Like, I really think this is one of the most interesting pilots. It's very, very interesting to look back 2 or even 3 years ago when we started. The pilot was really simple. Bitazza wanted to produce an event. It was before Corona hit Thailand, and it was the only place where you had festivals, and you can just really see this product in action in saving costs, especially during Corona, where people didn't want to touch cash. Bitazza didn't have to use Visa, and there was a solution that was, let's say, economically viable to launch ad hoc, a month before the event, a mobile wallet that just prevents people from touching physical cash, and saves a lot of fees in the process. Because you could just use Visa, and that wouldn't be that effective for that specific merchant. Fast forward a few years forward, and I think this turned into a whole vision. And really, I think the synergy with Bitazza is amazing, because we see ourselves as experts in building non-custodial wallets, experts in providing the infrastructure for minting branded stablecoins, for airdropping those stablecoins to customers. Really think about a business model and then implement it in code. So I think we found really interesting, I would say, partners, but also design partners with expertise and background in exactly that, in operation of those types of services. So that's one thing I'm very excited about. And actually, in the next few weeks, it's going to be probably beginning of February. There's going to be a very exciting announcement. So we're working on it for the last 6 months. It's called Fuse 2.0. I still can't say exactly what it means. It's not one thing. We're going to do really an interesting unveiling. We're talking about launching a new strategy, but it's a bit more ambitious than that. So in the beginning of February, there would be a big announcement. Our objective is to change the narrative. So until today, the narrative, when Bitcoin started, the narrative is that only central bank can create money. And then in 2017, the narrative is only the SEC can decide what is a security, with a test from about an orchard from 100 years ago. But that I would say that is a bit of a taboo, that is kind of broken, because those narratives are not discussed anymore. Nobody really talks about, is Bitcoin legitimate? I think people can agree that Bitcoin is legitimate, and even alternative types of Bitcoin are also legitimate. The next narrative would be, how do we use this technology for business adoption? Because business adoption is not there yet. Right now, there's almost barely retail adoption or even institutional adoption. And out of those groups, only Nike, Adidas, and companies like that, like really the big ones, Instagram, Facebook, they're the only companies that are able to use crypto in any way, and that's also debatable. SMBs, regular businesses, are not using crypto. Without SMBs, without business adoption, there would be no mainstream adoption. Never going to happen. So we'll stay at around tens of millions of users. So we want to change the narrative that we need this technology to not only serve investors. That's really the new narrative that we want to push.
Thank you so much for the kind words, and actually our vision is definitely aligns in terms of driving adoption via real world use cases, and products that are easy to understand, and also being offered to I guess different industries, different businesses. I suppose also, in my own word, taking crypto to places it's never been before. It's also something that's quite exciting when you think about it. And this migration from Web 2 to Web 3 is something that I suppose from our first collaboration back in December 2020 with the Mystic Valley Festival, as Mark mentioned, and today with the ecosystem that we had created with you under the name Freedomverse is super exciting, and we're very excited also to hear about this Fuse 2.0. So we will be definitely sticking around, and will be also helping you communicate this very exciting update to the audience from the Bitazza side. What about in terms of market focus? Because just now we've touched quite a bit on businesses, a B2B side, and also I suppose to drive real mass adoption, it takes understanding as well as what it means for the end user, right? So in terms of this, what would be the ideal target user for the Fuse chain, in your opinion?
So the people that pay, the businesses that pay fees in the network are the operators. So for us, operators are merchants or groups of merchants, or companies that do sharing economy, like startups that do food delivery and projects like that. Events, we recently built a payment process for events. We really look at payments as something that is all verticals to some extent, but it's something specific in every vertical. because payments right now are the missing link, in my opinion, in terms of using this new asset type in the real world, because you can't just move money around without some company or a system behind it, and it's badly missing in crypto. The fact that everybody are using, so it's not enough just to flatten and everybody will just use Ethereum. You actually need to provide services for businesses, and they don't really care about how Ethereum works. So the challenge is so how do we do subscriptions? It's a big problem in crypto. Merchants, that they don't really care that blockchains are push and not pull, like Visa. They don't really care that blockchains solve a problem that you can't have chargebacks by creating a different problem. That you can't have chargebacks. What if I want to cancel a transaction? What if I want insurance and I want to be able to reverse the transaction? What if I send money to somebody without an account? What if I need escrow? Real world scenarios for businesses that, usually they wouldn't even worry about it, but now it's actually become a problem, and everybody are expecting those businesses to solve it somehow. So it's clear that for business adoption, real business adoption, I'm talking about mom and pop shops that accept money with credit cards, and now they need to enable WeChat, and tomorrow they would need to enable Fuse or Freedom Wallet. For them it's a no-brainer. Why did they add it? They don't care about the technology, only because it was in demand, only because the consumers used it. So my point is, the more people will use it, the more businesses will use it, and the more businesses will use it, the more you would need real world payments integration. Right now, this use case is completely absent in crypto. If anybody wants to build on Ethereum, they just fork Ethereum and everything works the same way. Our contracts, they work differently. In our world, we don't expect users to pay gas. We expect the operators to cover their gas fees. So you asked, who are we looking to bring? Who are our users? Those are the startups. The same users, the same companies that are using Stripe today, they will be users of our network, just because it's 99% cheaper and it doesn't work only for North Americans and Europeans.
So essentially, in short, empowering different businesses, especially the ones that perhaps prior to the availability of the blockchain technology would not have access to these opportunities that you just mentioned, giving them a leveling grounds. Super interesting. And I think that we are totally aligned here, and it's to hear your goals and aspirations that are very, very similar, obviously, to Bitazza, and that's led to our collaboration. It's refreshing and super exciting. So let me just actually go to the several questions that our audience has sent. There is Mr. Federico Bossio that asked after could you please speak about the Fuse charge. Create a project on Fuse?
Yeah, so Charge is, I don't know if Federico, you're a crypto developer or blockchain developer. So Charge is a way for you to launch a project on Fuse with a few clicks without running your own nodes. So let's say that you want to access special APIs. You want an API to mint tokens, to transfer tokens, to do airdrops, payment APIs, webhooks for payments. You want to accept let's say you want to build your own loyalty program and then accept it as a payment in WooCommerce or with Shopify. Again, tell me what exactly is needed. You'll probably find an API on Charge that you can use. So Charge is really the cloud service for any business that doesn't want to run its own infrastructure. That's the short answer. It's like Infura, if you're familiar, or Alchemy for Ethereum. We created a version on Fuse that would be really, really familiar for Stripe users. So if you know how to use Stripe, you'll probably know how to use Charge.
Amazing. It's not every day that our audience gets to ask a question to the CEO of a EVM chain directly. That's great. Another question came from our Thai audience. คุณพี่คิดฮอดเถียงนาสวัสดีค่ะ he's asking, in your opinion, how would Web3 provide some key utilities in everyday life? And also a second question, what would be some of the key highlights of Fuse when compared to existing competition in the industry?
So let's so one was a question from technology
about
perspective.
Web3 and
Yeah.
how I suppose the utilities
Yeah, I'll try
to
to
highlight.
I'll try to give a quick answer because it's like a really philosophical question. Web 2 wasn't a piece of technology. It was a lot of technology. It wasn't a point in time where somebody just released and just upgraded it to Web 2. Web 2 was a change in the browser, a change in the underlying protocols, and a change in the languages themselves, and a change in the computing power. So a lot of things happen in parallel, and I feel people are the same thing with Web3. It's about blockchain, but it's also about identity. It's stuff that are blockchain agnostic. It's about new business models. So the way I see Web3 and Web2 is that from consumer perspective, you wouldn't feel a thing. You just start noticing you have more services. The services are more sophisticated. There's much more operators. There's much more variety and competition and a better service. And it's pretty much across the board, not only for finance, but pretty much all verticals. It's just like Web 2 was chats and forums. It wasn't like one thing really, really specific. Web 2 created blogs, YouTube, user content, social media. So that was really the effect of Web 2. It wasn't like a single technology. And you asked about Fuse and competition. So I think Fuse is building the first blockchain for business adoption. I don't think competition matters right now because we don't really see other blockchains for business adoption. Terra was really similar in their pitch. I would say their playbook was completely different. And I think our advantage is really the fact that we're not religious about crypto. We don't think things like ideology is not our thing. We don't think technology and ideology should be mixed. There's a lot of very, very interesting experiments on Ethereum that we feel that are robust enough to be introduced to real world use cases and real businesses. We think stable coins are example of that, and decentralized exchanges are a good example of that. So we're not saying every experiment in DeFi is relevant for business adoption, but this is our mission. We're taking everything that works on scale and everything that is battle tested in Ethereum ecosystem, and then we apply it for the business space. I think we're pretty unique in that approach.
Amazing. And I think that actually answers the question quite clearly. You're right, and a lot of these conversations have a lot to do with how one interprets the purpose of technology altogether, whether that is everyday life, whether that's business, whether that is just from the technical development perspective. So thank you for that. I am going to bring up another question from Nick Blanken. How is Fuse positions when authorities start putting in regulations in place? Payment systems on blockchains could be something which is a danger to the CBDC plans. What are your thoughts? A great question, by the way.
Great question, but let me give my prediction about CBDCs. They're not like, it's a bit like private blockchains. It's overhyped, in my opinion. Private blockchains, it's something that people were talking to me about in 2016, 17, that they look at the world as a binary thing, centralized, decentralized. In 2017, people would say this is a centralized technology, this is a decentralized technology. This works, this doesn't. So I think this dichotomy or this very binary approach, CBDCs are a hedge against Bitcoin for the Chinese government. And then from that hedge against Bitcoin, I don't know if you remember, 2016, 15, it was say blockchain and not Bitcoin. And then they reversed, and everybody liked Bitcoin anymore, don't like blockchain. But anyway, I'm digressing. CBDCs are a hedge of the Chinese government, that Bitcoin is actually a good thing. And a way to regulate it is to create your own centralized version of it. And I think it's an amazing idea. And they also proposed a two-tier system. I'm not sure that all the central banks are talking about a two-tier system, but the two-tier system is basically agnostic to crypto, because it's a way for CBDCs and Bitcoin to integrate into the Chinese banking system. So I would say CBDCs might be even a Trojan horse for Bitcoin. But because central banks are really bad at technology, because they're very risk averse and slow, I feel like they would be at a disadvantage if they want to actually do some technological improvement over crypto. So this is why I would cut it short, my answer, and just say that regulation is written in blood. Usually the best regulation that sticks around for many years is really written after a big crisis. Securities law and antitrust law, they were all introduced in the 20s after the Great Depression or the 30s. This is why I think regulations are not going to be super effective unless there's a big crisis and somebody will say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then in terms of technology, they're also in a disadvantage because, it's the central banks. They don't really have a technology track record. They usually buy an off-the-shelf product. They don't have innovation centers and development centers and stuff like that. So I would say that starting to fear regulation is not logical. And on the other hand, starting to be threatened technologically by CBDCs is also not logical. So I'm a big supporter of CBDCs. The mere discussion is crucial because right now there was a big problem, at least when Bitcoin was out, that everybody thought that the fiat money is a problem, that the fiat system is a problem, but every other part of the financial system is okay. And I think we have much bigger problems, not only the fiat problem, but the fact that the technology, most of the financial technology was really built before the internet. And it's very expensive to just even offering banking services, sometimes cost hundreds of millions of dollars, even to build the slightest product. And every time there's a breach, systems get more centralized and more isolated. We have a big problem technology in the financial technology space.
Art, do you have anything to add? Because I think that we agree, and essentially, with Bitazza being a licensed and regulated platform, we definitely see compliance and regulations actually being the key driver to real mass adoption, because that means the bridge to so the traditional world or the old world, and we cannot keep developing or running ahead of the pack without making sure everybody runs with us. Did you want to add anything to this, Art?
Yeah, for sure. I think regulation is something that is inevitable, and like Mark said, exactly right. It usually comes out after some big events trigger. Even Thailand, for example, we have this thing called the Emergency Act, emergency decree to regulate crypto businesses, especially after some companies started doing big ICOs in Thailand.
Yeah.
So it was like a response to ICOs actually that we have the exchange broker dealer ICO portal license in Thailand. It was more like a reaction to something, and so I think being in this space for quite a bit of quite a long time now, I think people generally regulators have good intentions. I think they want to regulate the space in a way that, at least in Thailand, I think leave some space for innovation. That's why you see countries like Thailand or some other countries see a lot of adoption in crypto in Asia, especially. So another key thing that I think is important is to be very proactive in approaching regulators. Be there with them, educating regulators and understanding where they're coming from, so that we could make sure that whatever comes out of regulation it's not like a knee-jerk reaction that would have long-term consequences to the space. We actually understand this whole you have so many other countries to innovate. So if one country starts prohibiting innovation, naturally people will just move their project to different.
That's the problem with Israel. The fact that the Israelis are really big in the tech world, but Israel is tiny. Because there's no leverage for the domestic market, and there's no fintech as a result. I think Thailand is a very interesting place that it has high cell phone penetration, literacy, stuff like that. There's a lot more room to grow, so it's much more attractive. So of course, it's much bigger in terms of people.
Yeah, I think it's it's more like a journey. Like we, after going through regulation, getting a license here in Thailand, it's an ongoing process. It doesn't end the moment you get the license. You still have to maintain the license. So that process itself is an educational thing for me as well. To learn where regulators are coming from and trying to adapt the business to be in line and be compliant with whatever comes our way. And also I think going back to your CBDC opinion, Thailand is also one of the countries where we have a central bank that expresses their desire to issue a CBDC, and I think they did project called Project Internon, which is like a wholesale CBDC project, and then they work exclusively with leading companies, big companies, doing like intercompany payments, cross-border payments, even with the Central Bank of Hong Kong. So I think that's also coming in Thailand, but I don't know exactly how it will affect whatever we're building in crypto, because again, like you said, it's like a closed network, like an intranet. It's private blockchain, be running on their own ledgers. How open it is to innovation and to smart contracts innovation is up to speculation at this point.
Yeah, my guess from talking with a lot of central banks, and this was really where we focused early days. My guess is that they're looking for a guinea pig. It's like any company that no company wants to be a guinea pig for new technology. When it comes to changing your financial system in that profound way, we're talking about regulating fiat money differently. And they call it the curse of cash, because you can't live with it, you can't live without it, and CBDCs don't really help necessarily with that problem.
Yeah, it might even be like a dystopian kind of future where at the very least for physical cash you have some kind of privacy. You can carry it
exactly. So that was always like from day one in crypto. We talked with central banks, we talked with private blockchains. We understood that there's two philosophies trying to make their way and meet in the middle. And I really hope CBDCs and crypto will meet in the middle. But one philosophy is let's focus on institutional regulatory needs, and let's build everything with the regulators hand in hand. And another approach that says let's rebuild the financial system without laws, with all coders. And I think those two approaches need to meet in the middle, because the world needs a digital equivalent of physical cash. Without it, it would be really hard to do anything that has to do with improving our current models. Our models are just like the models in DeFi are not really good or mature. I feel like our models in the traditional financial system are not really good or mature, especially when it comes to how we monetize stuff, especially in the internet age. So there's a lot of radical changes that needs to happen. So I really hope CBDCs and crypto will meet in the middle. That would be very important.
Yeah, Mark, I just want to pick your brains on this, since you've been working with stablecoins for so long and seeing its evolution. It's almost ironic that one of the main use cases of blockchain technology decentralization is the use of stablecoins, where the value itself is pegged to a centrally issued currency, in particular the US dollar. Therefore, whatever you're holding in stablecoins is dependent on the monetary policies of the issuer, and at the same time you have central issuer of stable coins. You have the tethers of the world, the circles, and the paxos of the world. and with CBDCs, we're actually just issuing the same thing, but then instead of going through this middleman, the issuer that takes your dollar and put in a bank and earn the interest, is now issued by the government. So how is that different, and how do you see the relationship between CBDC and stable coins come into conflict down the road?
Okay, so let's start from my speculation that banks or central banks don't know how to be B2C, don't know how to do direct to consumer or deal with customers, and this is like mostly thanks to the commercial banking model, and this is the model everywhere. Correspondent banking and commercial banking. This idea that you have different banks for different client types. So larger banks, large clients, smaller banks, smaller clients, credit unions. You have like a spectrum. Not every bank that wants to be regulated needs to be regulated as a bank. There's a lot of e-money. So the entire financial system is based on their idea on their ability to understand who is the client, what is his problem, what kind of loan he needs. That's basically their business model. Give us your salary, we'll give you yield. Give us, we will give you credit. You'll give us, your salary. Anyway, that the whole business model is built on understanding their behavior and risk managing. And I would say that the central bank is not interested in risk managing. They're only interested in providing. I would say, and again, this is my thought, my feeling that correspondent banking will not. That's the objective is not to change the correspondent banking model, but it's more like central banks need the real-time macroeconomic. They set policy. And until today, they really didn't know what's the velocity of the currency. Everything was in hindsight, and it's really hard to make decisions when you don't really see a real-time macroeconomic data. And the fact that things become digital gives the banks a lot more tools in their arsenal, tools they don't even know they need or they can't even understand yet. For instance, being able to adjust rates dynamically based on consumption in different areas, or even tracking this macroeconomic data. All I'm saying is that what we think is a change. I think it's a whole new thing. It's not replacing anything. It's in addition. It's not coming instead of cash. It's definitely not coming instead of correspondent banking. It's coming as mostly a hedge against Bitcoin, and mostly probably in the West at least it will happen because somebody else finds success somewhere in the world. Because I don't feel like we're talking here about experimental stuff. If Thailand would want to do this at scale, is because they have a model that was proven, and it's not really just the bank. The central bank is just competing with commercial banks, and I don't think that's the case. It's more like SEPA, and I don't know if you're familiar with the ACH, Automatic Clearinghouse in the US, and SEPA and faster payments in UK. Those are all central bank systems that the bank already provides and governs. And we were talking about like CBDCs are mainly tackling those it's called RTGS, real-time gross settlement systems. And this is exactly what the very old pre-internet piece of technology that really will enable more people to access this ability, to move money around. So already this is something the central bank provides.
Right.
I think yeah, go ahead, Art.
Just like I think I agree. I think it's very clear that especially what you mentioned about the banks and the central banks are not actually in competition. They're actually focusing on different things.
So actually, there is a last question from one of our audience, and then in the Bitazza fashion, we also have quite a personal question. But let's go to Kun Jintana Prongjit, who is actually bringing up a little bit of what we had discussed at the beginning of our session. She had said that following all the challenges and problems that have been occurring in our crypto industry, and also, and the entry into this now bear market, what would be some of the key points that you would like to highlight in terms of the strengths of the Fuse project that would actually create credibility for your ecosystem, especially for the wallet products or anything that has to do essentially with like payment solutions? How would you answer this to create some credibility and trust?
Well, I think the only way to trust something is to learn and give it time. So I don't think there's something I can say. Oh look, we have a special license. I don't know. It's not really something I can put my finger on. I think when you choose a team, when your investment is hard, you don't always have the information, but you cannot sometimes trust your own judgment. So first of all, we're very transparent. We didn't start this last year. We're actually doing it for a while. Every piece of code always was transparent from day one. Everything was open source. So you can actually, instead of trust us, go and see the activity on GitHub, go read the documentation, see every piece of article that we released in the last 3 years, and also check out the ecosystem because it's really very specific to our use case. And feel free to reach out. Anybody that hears, if they connect to the vision and they want to be an operator. We're not claiming that there's more transactions on Fuse than on Ethereum. There's a lot of transactions on Fuse, 150 million in the last 3 years. A lot of them were in the last year, so really growing. So everybody can also see the momentum. But I really think that our narrative or our focus wasn't a big focus in the 2020 rally, but it will be a big focus in the next rally. And I'm a believer that you shouldn't raise too much too early. You really need to build momentum. So we're really been quite quiet. We started without any marketing at all, and we're starting to be louder and louder and louder. And we also see the traction building. So if you agree with our vision, then I think you should, at the very least, subscribe to our channel.
That's very lovely. Also, I think one of the questions that we always ask our guests, at the end of the program, is that being in crypto is hard. It's very hard to wake up in the morning and to go out and especially in the bear market, when things don't go our way all the time. So we always ask that we want to understand what is your motivation, like what gets you up in the mornings, that you get excited about going to the office, meeting your team, getting to work. So what drives you?
So first of all, I really like the technology part of being in a startup and the product part more than networking and doing. My comfort zone is on the technology side. So this is why bear market is really my cup of tea. Like I definitely have much more fun the last 6 months than before when the token was going up. I rather the token go down because not good for investors, but very good for builders, and they don't really appreciate how, because somehow people just wipe out 80% of the noise overnight. And I would say that when tokens are pumping, everything is pumping. It's really impossible to tell if you're doing a good product release, bad product release, if the competitor has good ideas, bad ideas. It's really, as people say, speculative. The natural way things should work is like in a bear market. That's my real belief. The effort right now is to tell what is real, like what is really interesting, and what is maybe very speculative, and a bear market is a really good chance to tell everything apart. So I'm having a lot of fun in the last 6 months. But that's from a builder perspective. This is what gives me motivation. I like to push out code and write stuff and see people use it and see people coming back. So just coming one time and use it is not interesting. But actually, we built a product 2 years ago when Corona started, 2.5 years ago. We saw a lot of communities in the world during Corona that said, okay, we need a digital money solution. And some of them we worked with them, and for a few months we had several conversations, and watching them doing transactions daily ever since for the last 2 years. Our project Comunitaria in Seville, in Italy, in Spain, just doing activity on a daily basis, and it's just been very, very sticky the last 2 years. Doesn't matter what's the price. So this is what I love about this technology, that some of the use cases are very, very not speculative, are actually very, very, very clear need.
All right. That answer is super on brand with who Fuse is and what you guys stand for. I guess as a project and as a person, just based off of what we know about you, Mark. I think it speaks volume. Especially in this time where the market sentiment and just I guess publicity from all over. With different surrounding factors and pressures and all those things, but as creators are just creating and actually, as you mentioned, during this quiet time where a lot of the attention's spending elsewhere, it's exciting to be thinking about what we're changing, or what are some of the other things that we're driving in a longer run. So with that was really, really fruitful, a really nice session. And we will definitely be talking a lot more about our collaborations and all the products that Bitazza and Freedomverse has on the Fuse chain. Also, there will be exciting campaigns following this session. As we mentioned, we're here to stay for the long run. So our audience who are watching, please be sure to stay updated as Bitazza announces a lot more features on the Freedom wallets, including a Freedom passport that will let give access or grant access to all the different things under the Bitazza DAO or DAO, as we had previously mentioned, even in the white paper of Bitazza. So, fun things like this, utilities like this that we are co-creating, that can definitely be followed up on all of the Bitazza channels. And as Mark mentioned, please do subscribe to Fuse and all of their channels as well. It's going to be a very, very good year. I can just feel it. And if anybody else wanted to reach out to you, I'm sure that your team will also be taking any more questions on your platform. So thank you so much for your time, and again, it's really a pleasure to just be optimistic about the space. And as you said, we're all here not even thinking whether this is blockchain or crypto or anything. We're just continuing to build the things that will help businesses and touch people's lives and change things and grow things. It's so nice. And thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your time as well, Art. So with that, thank you everyone for staying on with us. So we'll be here back with you again soon. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks for inviting me. Thank you.
สวัสดีค่ะ
Radhika, bye out, Didi. Thanks very much.